Today I posted about a little bit of information about trauma and mindfulness and meditation. Um, it's always kind of a shock, and to me, that it makes me sad because with my trauma training, this is so basic that it 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 floors me that this is not collectively known. In fact, mindfulness strategies are used a lot as for attempted for trauma treatment, and it doesn't make sense to traumatize nervous systems. Now, there are people that meditation was helpful with their trauma, but we have to be mindful that with trauma is so nuanced. It is so specific. It is so unique to each individual. What helps one person can harm another person, and that applies to everything. There is no blanket treatment or modality that works for everyone. That is just not true. Now, a short teaching on our nervous systems. Our nervous systems remember everything that has ever happened to us and to our ancestors, and in fact, remembers everything that has happened to the archetype of humanity. And so we can inherit a dysregulated nervous systems just by the nature of our caregivers' stress and their caregivers and their caregivers and their caregivers, and what happens in our early life experiences, and even what happens later in life. So some folks don't experience complex or childhood trauma, they experience maybe later relational or religious or workplace trauma or some type of other systems trauma. But a nervous system remembers. Now, a lot of meditation practices are taught that you have to meditate in a certain way for a certain length of time, and you have to close your eyes, you have to sit in a certain way. There's no magic that happens by closing your eyes or sitting in a certain way. In fact, closing your eyes can be very, very terrifying for individuals with certain trauma histories, especially for folks who've had to dissociate. Like, if you think about sexual trauma and the levels of dissociation that has to happen, and the fact that people have closed their eyes through sexual trauma, of course, closing your eyes and being forced to breathe, even in certain patterns, can be triggering, because breath work can be triggering. Um, this is in my world, this is widely known, and it makes me so sad. I guess that's the word. Um, I have a lot of feelings about this, but it's makes me sad because um, even for someone's heart rate to go up or to notice their breath can be super triggering for someone that's a trauma survivor, because a lot of times when folks have experienced trauma, their heart rate is very elevated. And so the fact that when someone's heart rate goes up, this is why some people can't exercise. Maybe this is a whole nother video, because there's a somatic implicit memory. So there's a remembering. The body will remember, oh, when my breath rate was really high, or I was breathing really fast when that happened. Now, this is all happening beyond your conscious awareness, but this is why breath work or even exercising can make someone be triggered. And so it's the same for meditation, because a lot of practices, breath counting meditation, that's commonly a way that meditation is taught. So my approach with trauma, just in general, and mindfulness and meditation practices are, I do a lot of education at first, and we do nervous system. I do polyvagal mapping sometimes, and do a lot of education on trauma at first, because the first level of trauma informed care is stabilization and education, and so I do that. The second thing I do is stabilization. Beyond stabilization is trauma processing. So then we move to different methods like somatic experiencing, or some of the other trauma processing methods that I use with our bodies, to create more safety or more presence within. Because meditation requires safety. It just does. So does mindfulness, requires an element of safety within first. And so we may spend a lot of our time there together, just doing stabilization or safety exercises within the body. through somatic experiencing, so that the felt sense of safety or being safer is another place for a traumatized nervous system to go. Because what happens with trauma, and with complex trauma especially, is someone's typical day-to-day experience is in the trauma vortex, is in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, dissociation. Is those are the options. And with complex trauma, a lot of individuals haven't ever had the experience of feeling safer or safety. And so, and then because of that, feeling safe can actually be really dysregulating at first. And so we have to even practice experiencing that. And it gets even more interesting because for trauma survivors, we often, even when good things are happening, we're often waiting for the other shoe to drop. So not only are we retraining and using somatic practices to create safety or feeling safer within, or more grounded, or more presence, or more, a little bit more regulated, or a little bit more presence, a little bit more health, a little bit more ease, a little bit more regulation, a little bit more calm. We also have to work towards holding the capacity for goodness and joy, because a lot of trauma survivors, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because if we grew up in chaotic environments, or had tricky relationships, or relationships that weren't safe with anyone, it could be a employer, it could be a medical practitioner, it could be a significant other, it could be anyone in our lives, we're often waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so we have to train our nervous systems to actually feel goodness without all of the intrusive cyclical thoughts of it's all going to fall away. So we train for that. Now, where does meditation mindfulness fit in? Oftentimes, now again, this is not a blanket statement, because I can't make a blanket statement for anyone with any trauma history, because the trauma treatment is very, very individualized for each person. Okay? Has to be. So this video may not apply to you whatsoever. And I can guarantee you, if I were to know your story and to observe your nervous system, we could come up with what would work best for you, because your nervous system is my teacher, and that's what we listen to all of the time. Your body always, always, always knows. And we don't, part of it is the negative beliefs and the limiting beliefs that come in, is the gap between the body's automatic response and us creating a story about it, when we have no education about trauma and what it does. So here's your permission for meditation mindfulness. If it's not working for you, congratulations. That's not your next move, okay? A lot of times people will, even well-meaning practitioners and providers will tell individuals to meditate, and it can be so re-traumatizing and triggering, especially if it's even adjacent to any element of someone's trauma history. It can be super triggering. It can cause massive, massive, massive levels of dissociation. And a lot of folks are walking around in functional freeze already. They have no idea that they have a trauma history. They know that meditation doesn't work. They know that they're always they feel like they are procrastinating. They feel like they have to, but they can't. They feel their nervous system is activated and off all at the same time. It's like pushing the gas and the brake all at the same time with someone in functional freeze. And that is the default state for a lot, I would say almost the majority of our population. And people are so unaware of it. And oftentimes people come to me last. They've gone to 20, 50 different practitioners. And then they're like, well, I'm going to just, this is your my last shot. And then it's a tragedy, because they've been trying so hard, and they begin re-traumatize across the whole model, because trauma has this negative connotation. And trauma is chronic disconnection. That's one definition. Trauma is anything that's not immediately processed in the moment. Trauma is anything that happens that's too much, too fast, and too soon. Trauma is also what doesn't happen afterwards. Not having a caregiver that is safe most of the time, not being seen and heard, not being able to show up authentically as yourself. So there's a lot of neurodivergent folks that have extreme levels of trauma, because they are have all of these, folks with ADHD, they have tens of thousands of messages as to how they aren't really safe to kind of be themselves in the world, and they internalize all of that. And so there's significant levels of trauma there. Part of my background is I'm a disability expert, and I understand that we can bring accommodations into our medical, our meditation, our mindfulness, in our spiritual practices, into our healing, and that's okay. So you have permission to anything that you do with the most amount of presence that you can hold within your being. That's mindfulness. So if it's cooking a meal, that's mindfulness. If that's going for a walk, that's mindfulness. If that's doing a workout, you're actually meditating. That's mindfulness. Now, some people will debate me on this, and that's fine. But anything that you do with the intention of being more present, that's mindfulness. So you probably have aspects of mindfulness already that you're doing day to day. And you have permission to do that and that to be your portal for mindfulness. So mindfulness doesn't have to be sitting down. There's no magic powers. Now, again, ancient wisdom traditions, there's certain postures and ways of being that there is, and I don't negate the spiritual technology that is present, but I'm specifically talking about folks with trauma histories that are trying to access meditation and mindfulness practices. That can come later, okay? But first, we want to have stability. We want to have processing. We want to have enough safety within our somatic cells, within our physical body, and external safety. So that has to come together. Folks, that it's really hard to meditate if you're worrying about, like, where's your next meal going to come from? Do you have safe housing? Do your children have safe childcare? So we have some societal um, structures and methods and systems to look at too when we talk about mindfulness practices too. It's hard to get in a meditative state, if you're in a domestic violence situation, you don't have anywhere to go. Okay, so we have to be very honest about the realities here. So there's no special things. Later, yes, there are ways and practices and certain ways of sitting and being. But if you want to enter a mindfulness practice, it can be really, really helpful to do that with someone that's trauma informed. And again, I do that in like the third stage afterward. Somatic experiencing practices over and over to rewire someone's nervous system. Sometimes we do mapping, sometimes we do parts work, all of these different things. There's a lot of different modalities. I like to pull from, 8, 10, 12 plus modalities for trauma, because what works for one person is not going to work for the next. And wherever someone's at, I like to be able to have enough methods, tools in my toolbox to pull out the right tool for the situation, right? I'm not going to hammer. I'm not going to hammer a nail in with a screwdriver because that's all that I have. I want to be able to pull out the right tool. So there's no magical way. You can meditate as you shower. Like maybe that's your meditation practice, like the shampoo, the soap, and the bubbles. You can meditate laying down. You can meditate walking meditations. I wrote this in my book that's probably never coming out, my book to nowhere. All these different meditation practices to make it a little bit more accessible than what we commonly think as meditation practices. You're allowed to use a fidget. You're allowed to use a fidget with your meditation practice. You're allowed to chew gum. You're allowed to suck on a candy or a cough drop with your meditation practice. You're allowed to meditate with your eyes open. Okay? You're allowed to meditate with your eyes open. And for trauma survivors, I really, really, really recommend after the stability and the processing that you start with very, very small increments of meditation, because folks, they are meditating a lot of times, but a lot of times what they are really doing is they are getting very, 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 very dissociated. And folks come in and they're lifelong functional freeze and they don't know it. And so they get very, very dissociated. And how that can feel is you're not aware of your body. You're not aware of, you feel very foggy. You feel very fuzzy. You feel kind of disconnected, a little spacey, kind of, and it can go far, even further out from there. So when I teach meditation, I teach it with somatic experiencing practices so that you're aware of your body after the stability and the processing has done, and so teaching mindfulness from there. So unfortunately, I guess this information isn't widely known. I learned this information from all of my training with trauma, specifically somatic experiencing, which is the 3-year program. was probably the best, but there's been tons of other ways that I know this. And most of all, listening to my clients. I've been working with folks for decades and decades, and my clients have been my greatest teachers. And I am so grateful for my somatic experiencing training. I'm just about to finish up my second intermediate year and going into the advanced year, which includes touch, and I can't wait for that. But I'm so grateful for my somatic experiencing training, because that has been the most in-depth training that I've gotten as far as to understand all of these things. And with that, my greatest teacher and my greatest guide is your nervous system. So if your nervous system is saying meditation doesn't work for you, that's your body knowing. That's your body knowing. And I think that meditation and mindfulness practices can be for everyone, but just not yet, because we need to put the supports, accommodations, adaptation, stability, and processing and support in first. And when those conditions are met, then meditation and mindfulness can be for everyone. I do believe that, and I have seen that in my practice with my clients, in the practice with myself. There were periods of time where I couldn't close my eyes because some of the traumas happened that I had to dissociate from, and that was very, very activating. And so, really listen to your clients and get curious if they're telling you. So, if you're a practitioner, if they're telling you that doesn't work, that's their body's wisdom as to that doesn't work. And guess what? There is 100% reason why it's not working, and that is the body's innate wisdom. Okay, so the body always knows. And so somatic experiencing has the most beautiful process, because I am just following the nervous system of someone. I'm following myself, and I'm following their nervous system. And their nervous system is, in every moment, knows exactly what to do, what is safer for the nervous system. And from there, we're just listening. So that's the coolest thing. Is everyone's nervous system very unique. There's over 8 billion of us on the planet. That means there's over 8 billion different ways the nervous system work. But predictably, following polyvagal theory, I can understand and explain to you which trauma response is happening, typically why it's happening, and what we can do about that for the first line, okay, for the stability, always. And then we can get into the processing. So although there's a lot of unique nervous system patterns, there's a lot of very common things that we can work on together. And so I love that. Because I believe in that healing is for everyone, and somatic experiencing somatic solutions are the ones where folks come to often last, and they're ones that folks probably need the most. And so I will continue to educate about this, because I'm shadow banned for speaking about some of these things on social media. And so I'm looking for a platform so that I can, and this is all of my information is evidence-based, but there's a lot of powers that be, that because of funding, follow the money, right? Like, because of funding, the information that I have, there are folks that don't want that to be available, because if we're all healed and healthy and whole, and we can connect into peace and love and those types of things, well, how are you going to sell quick fixes? How is Big Pharma going to continue to say that they're the only solution? They are a solution, definitely, but what are the other alternative and complementary solutions, right? Because there's so many. And that is where I'm at. What would you like to learn more about? And was this video helpful? I'd love to hear from you. I love getting feedback. Bye-bye.